This is it, week 17, our last waiver wire stash video of the year, obviously. This one is going to be very specific. It's a very specific video because we're literally only looking at guys who could pay off in one big, very specific game. So for that reason, I am switching things up a little bit. I'm giving you a variety of options at each position. Yes, that includes defense. I am giving you three stashes at every single position. So technically that actually equals like 15 stashes, not 10. Giving you a little extra there, the holy grail of streaming options in week 17. So you can pick and choose based on your needs. And of course, drop any start sit questions that you got in the comments. Let's beat the waiver wire together. We talked about him in the waiver wire video 2 weeks in a row. 2 QB1 performances in a row. Minnesota has really come through on this soft schedule to close out the season, and McCarthy is absolutely taking advantage of it. And if you need a streaming option in week 17, go ahead and stash McCarthy because this week he's literally got an extremely easy matchup against the Giants. And then in week 17, he plays Detroit. And if you follow me, I have talked about Detroit's defense like 1,000 times this week, 10,000 times maybe. It is fantastic against the run, awful against the pass. It is a pure numbers game here. Their offense is so good that 9 times out of 10, the result is aggressive pass volume no matter what quarterback is playing them. In fact, we've already got a direct reference point. A 3-touchdown performance by McCarthy against Detroit in week 9, literally his 3rd career start. So with so many quarterback injuries and underwhelming performances piling up, McCarthy is truly one of the better streaming options that you can find on waivers. If McCarthy is already rostered, you could go with Shough. Hear me out on this one. Shough has been quietly putting up very solid performances recently. He's done so in a wide variety of ways. Last week against Carolina, he pushed pretty aggressive volume, completing 24 of his 32 attempts for 272 yards and a passing touchdown. Plus, he added a little work on the ground with 32 rushing yards for a perfectly adequate 18 fantasy point day, finishing his QB 16 on the week. Very stream-worthy there. The week prior to that against Tampa Bay, he had a very low volume day in terms of pass, completing 13 of 20 attempts there for 144 yards, but he added 55 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns to finish his QB 6 on the week. Very impressive. The week prior to that, he had a combination of the two for an 18 fantasy point performance again, finishing as QB 12 on the week there. There has been a noticeable difference in the increase in rushing volume that he's had recently that has given him a really nice floor, and he's definitely getting more comfortable in the offense. Kellen Moore is letting the reins loose a little bit, and he is thriving in a wide variety of situations and matchup. This week, he's got a great matchup against the Jets, and in week 17, Tennessee. If you can't grab Shough, you can turn to Kirk Cousins. Cousins has a great matchup against Arizona this week, and he's coming off his best performance of the season by far, throwing for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns against Tampa Bay. Kyle Pitts has been fantastic as his first look, and it looks like he's getting Drake London back as well. So he'll have his full arsenal of weapons more than likely to close out the fantasy season. And again, we've got a great matchup this week now, week 17. Week 17 is against the Rams. Obviously, this is riskier because it could go one of 2 ways. Either aggressive pass volume, a great amount of production because they are chasing points, and there might be a couple of turnovers, but the overall volume will push him through. Or it could be a complete disaster, no touchdowns, and just a whole bunch of interceptions. Ask Sam Darnold. He has had both against the Rams. So he is definitely the riskiest option here for streaming. Now, running backs. Yes, I know this is not the first time that we have talked about Emanuel Wilson as a stash. We did it last week for absolutely no reason, but apparently, supposedly, Josh Jacobs is leaning more towards not playing this week. Now, have we been duped in the past? Yes, absolutely. But if Jacobs does not play and subsequently cannot play next week as well, Wilson would be perhaps the most critical stash on your fantasy roster. We have live game experience of Wilson as the direct handcuff. We saw him in week 12 with a whopping 28 carries, 107 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Week 17 is against Baltimore, and it's tough to peg exactly what kind of matchup Baltimore is because their defense is rather inconsistent. But objectively, I would say that they are more difficult on the ground. But again, I don't really care what the matchup is here for Wilson. He would get significant volume, so that would make him an immediate RB2, a fine starter. Again, Bam Knight and Trey Benson are done for the year, and now it is time for Michael Carter to carry the workload. We talked about this in the waiver wire video. I said I was slightly concerned that Arizona would pull a fast one on us and flip again and force this annoying committee or make it so that a Amari DiMercato was going to be the lead back, despite the fact that Carter acted as the lead back in week 15. But Jonathan Gannon said that Michael Carter will be the lead back. Am I still slightly concerned? Yes, because he also said that Amari DiMercato will be involved. So technically speaking, the man could still be mincing words and utilizing DiMercato more once the game actually gets going. But given the fact that Week 17's matchup is against Cincinnati, I'm willing to forego my reservations and lean into Carter as a priority stash here. Jacoby Brissett has been on fire, our glorious volume king, and that means that he provides plenty of goal line opportunities. They will flow, as I said before. The reason that I preferred Bam Knight over Amari DiMercato was that I want the guy that gets the short yardage goal line opportunity work. That logic still applies. It is now transferred over to Michael Carter. Audric Estime should be the lead back, and we are stashing him because it does make a ton of sense. It does. Worst case scenario, if he is ineffective this week, we simply choose not to play him in week 17. No harm, no foul, even though the matchup is excellent. Best case scenario, he picks right up where Devin Neal left off, and he is a strong RB2 in week 17. Alvin Kamara has missed multiple weeks. I honestly would not expect him back next week. Devin Neal was placed on IR. The only man that could be an issue here is theoretically Evan Hull. So depending on how Estime looks this week in an excellent matchup, we will be able to judge our week 17 move. So go ahead and grab him now, stash, wait and see. I'm going to be very upfront with you on this one. The waiver wire options at wide receiver are simply not anywhere near the caliber or potential at other positions. So with that said, I think it's worth it to stash Luther Burden in hopes that he returns in week 17 in a good matchup against San Francisco. The main reason is that it does not look like we are getting Rome Odunze back this fantasy season. So if Luther Burden is active, he could be the wide receiver one. He clearly has a solid floor, and the San Francisco 49ers are a relatively pass-friendly matchup. They have allowed the 14th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and again, obviously that number is still a little bit skewed because the defense lost multiple superstars as the season went on. So if you were in a deep league and you have the option to just hold like just in case and be okay if he's not available, Luther Burden is a good option. Now, if you were in a deeper league there, you could turn to Olamide Zaccheaus in the event that Luther Burden cannot play next week. Adonai Mitchell had a great game in week 15 with 7 receptions on 10 targets for 69 yards and a touchdown. But at the end of the day, he is still a Hail Mary play that is extremely boom bust, and there is no in between. There is no in between whatsoever. I would only turn to Mitchell in deeper leagues, and you can occasionally roll him out as a boom bust player if you're playing from behind, you're the underdog, you need that high upside swing. Now, week 17 is a matchup against New England, who does occasionally give boom games, so not all is not lost here, because again, they force a team often to chase points, and that is exactly what would happen to the Jets offense. They likely would be playing from behind, and their defense would likely be getting lit up by New England. So while I don't really like Mitchell as a play against New Orleans this week, I don't like that matchup. We are talking about week 17. I would not be opposed to rolling Mitchell out in week 17, specifically in deeper leagues. He has started 5 games now. In those 5 games, he has had approximately 2, 6, 24, 3, 19 fantasy points in PPR. That's kind of crazy. He's just a volatile player with a very high ceiling and a super low floor. So again, honestly, there's not a ton of options on waiver wire for wide receivers that I like as stashes for week 17. It just worked out that way, unfortunately. But my theme here is that I give you 3 players, so 3 players I will give you. If you play in a very deep league, I think it is worth stashing Hollywood Brown. Yeah, Gardner Minshew at quarterback is not exactly an ideal situation, and the matchup against Denver is awful. This is the one time that I'm recommending a player who does objectively have a terrible Week 17 matchup. But realistically, there's a decent chance that, given the fact that the Chiefs are out of the playoffs and without Patrick Mahomes, that we may be without Rashee Rice again in week 17, and we could be dealing with a very unmotivated and unhappy Travis Kelce. Denver's defense wouldn't necessarily be a bad matchup specifically for Hollywood Brown. Assuming that Brown plays more out of the slot, Xavier Worthy would be the one with the more difficult coverage. And given the fact that we do have a previous game against Denver for the Chiefs as evidence, where the most productive receiver outside of Rashee Rice was actually Hollywood Brown, it does make a lot of sense that we might actually see usable fantasy points from Brown in this matchup, especially if he has increased volume. Again, the vast majority of leagues do not need to do this move. Don't. But if you're in a deeper league, and you are dealing with injuries here and we are having them pile up, we already don't expect Devontae Adams for week 17, and you need options for a low-end flex option with potential, you can turn to Hollywood Brown. Now let's go back to a happier position here. Tight ends. This is a much happier position. Colston, Loveland. We'll start off here. A little bit higher rostered, 43% of Yahoo leagues. So don't worry. Again, I am going to give you some other options as well. But your big priority here should be to get Colston Loveland if he is available on waivers with Roma Dunze out and Luther Burden out. We will likely see an increased usage of Loveland this week. And again, while Luther Burden could return next week, the likelihood of Roma Dunze returning seems very slim at this point. Week 17 is a good matchup against San Francisco, so this would definitely be your priority here. Your next priority is to go and look at the availability of Theo Johnson, who is also over 40% rostered. But again, I've got another option for you. But if Johnson is available, grab him. The upside hasn't been exactly where we would want it to be compared to what we saw earlier in the season with Jackson Dart. But the Week 17 matchup is against Las Vegas, and you really can't ask for better than that. He would definitely be a solid streaming option if you make it to championship week. Now for your lower rostered option, your guy that is on waivers, Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki is your man. He had a bad Week 15 performance, but I believe we talked about this in last week's stash video, and I believe I specifically said that we are stashing him for upcoming matchups, not for Week 15, because Baltimore is an objectively bad matchup for tight ends. So I was not expecting him to have a good day whatsoever. However, Miami is a good matchup for tight ends, and Arizona is an excellent matchup for tight ends. Arizona allows the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, and that's saying a lot because you have to remember they don't have to play against Trey McBride. So if you are looking for a lower rostered streaming option readily available on waivers with a great matchup, Gesicki is your guy. Okay, now for defenses, I'm going to run through quickly several options for you. If you are in a shallow league, check waivers and see if anybody dropped the Patriots defense because they had a bye week, then they played Buffalo, now they play Baltimore. So we have seen a decent amount of drops and a lower percentage than you would think for them. So they could be on waivers. Check and see. In week 17, they played the Jets. So enough said. Also, check and see if Tampa Bay is available on waivers. They have an excellent Week 17 matchup against Miami and the newly appointed Quinn Ewers. And then after that, if those are not available, you can dig a little deeper and potentially take a chance on the New York Giants. I know, but hear me out. They play Vegas in Week 17, and all Vegas quarterbacks are very friendly matchups. And that wraps things up. Thank you for watching our last waiver wire stash of the 2025 season. It's been real, guys. It's been real fun. As always, make sure that you are liking the video and subscribing to the video as well. You can also find me across all social media platforms at It's Terra Time, so make sure that you are locked in, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff, because we are this close to the off season. We are talking rookies, free agencies, draft. It is going to be so much fun, so stick around.